What do I want? When was the last time you really asked yourself this question? Many of us are so caught up with our kids, our careers, that we lose track of what we want. And some of us even lose track of who we are. A few months ago, I was overwhelmed that my oldest son was heading off to college in a year and uncertain of the path forward for my business. I came across a book called The Life Brief, a playbook for no regrets living. I figured, why not? I'd like to live a life without regrets. I started with the audio version to listen to when driving. Super low stakes. I very quickly realized that I must get the hard copy so I could really dive into the lessons. The book encouraged me to be honest about what I really want. And the truth was, I really didn't know. The book gave me a framework and permission to explore the question. And since then, I've recommended the book to several clients and friends. It's been especially relevant to clients who are retiring in the next few years. Today, I'm so honored and thrilled to have the author of The Life Brief, Bonnie Wan, here with us. Today, we're going to explore living with intention, creativity, and courage without regrets. I'm Betty Wang, the host of Betty's Smart Friends. I'm a certified financial planner who helps women feel more empowered and less alone when it comes to their money. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Bonnie. She's a partner and head of brand strategy at Goodby Silverstein Partners, recognized as one of Fast Company's most innovative companies. Bonnie has over 3 decades of experience in brand clarity and innovation and was awarded Ad Age's Leading Woman and Chief Strategy Officer of the Year. In 2010, she created the Life Brief, a tool that saved her marriage and sparked a decade of personal and professional adventures. Her book, The Life Brief, is on Amazon's list of best books of 2024 for business and leadership. Wow. Get ready for an inspiring conversation as we explore Bonnie's journey and her insights on living boldly and how you can create your own life brief to unlock the life you truly desire. Welcome to Bonnie Wan. Hi, Bonnie. Thanks so much for joining.
Oh my gosh, thanks, Betty, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. Um, for those folks who don't know about the life brief, can you explain a little bit of the framework to us?
Yeah, so it's inspired by my work as a brand strategist that I've been doing, as you said, for the last 3 decades. I help companies get really clear about who they are at their essence and then match that to their biggest, greatest, boldest ambitions for what's next. And it's in that intersection that brand strategy lives. So the tool that we use as strategists in business is what's called a brief, or in the creative businesses, a creative brief, which is a really sharply distilled and sticky expression of where we're all going. So, what helps with that is it centers everyone inside a company and outside a company to know what makes it distinct, unique, and where it's going in the world. And it's all summarized in this single page, single minded strategy. And that is the framework for the life brief, which I discovered in 2010 when I hit a big ditch in my marriage. And I, in my darkest hour, felt really desperate about where do I go with this, because what was looming ahead of us was separation, divorce, all the things with 3 young kids. And that felt like doomsday for me. I felt desperate. And what I did instead, probably as a last ditch effort, was to reflexively go to what I do as a brand strategist, which is look at the data, look at the research. But the data was about me, and the research was about what was going on inside of me. And I collected all that. And that was the first step in now what has become the Life Brief framework, which is about getting messy, giving yourself permission to ask, meet, and answer questions that you might have been avoiding. And then the second part of the framework is getting clear. And it's very hard to get clear, whether it's for businesses or people, if you haven't allowed yourself to get messy first, meaning doing the research, letting the ingredients come up from inside you. And only when we get clear, and I mean sharp, sticky, I call it fuck yes clear. I hope it's okay to press on your
Absolutely.
podcast.
Absolutely. Please.
But when you reach that level of clarity where you feel it in your bones and all the cells in your body, then action, which is the last step, getting active, becomes almost natural and organic.
And let's talk about a little bit about the getting messy part, right? I think, what does that actually mean um, in relation to the life brief? How do we get there? How do we do that? Um, what is the roadmap?
Well, we start with questions, just like the one you opened this podcast with and that I opened the book with. But that's not the only question, but it is one of the driving questions. What do you really, really want? And it's not about what are you in the mood for? What do you feel like? It's about in your heart of hearts. What do you really, really want that you haven't even allowed yourself to admit to yourself? And that is a hard question. It stumps a lot of people. You are not alone when you said, I didn't know, because we're out of practice. And especially as women, we are not asked, what do we want? And you and I share the background of being Asian women from Taiwan. And in our culture, and I think it goes well beyond Asia, there's a culture that women, we are conditioned to put other people first. Whether it's people at work, people, definitely our families, right? Friends, society. We are the last people who get to answer the question, what do we want? And a lot of other cultures, I think, breed the same thinking that it's a selfish thing to ask for what you want. And because we're out of practice, it takes time to let the question drop in, stir. It's not going to come up all in one sitting. We can't will it to come up. We have to kind of let it steep like a tea. And then we collect the answers little by little as they come up, but collect them in writing because it's hard to remember. And I don't know what age you're at, but I'm at the menopause age. And so I
Yes.
can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, much less the big lightning rod flash of what I
Yes.
want,
Yes.
So capturing it either on your, phone if you're driving or, in a little recording, or I really encourage 5 to 10 minutes of writing, just where you can aim your attention at the question and allow whatever comes up to come out onto the page. And that's the permission part. And we also have a hard time. There's a lot of nuances to what we have difficulty with. The first is asking the question and aiming our attention at it at all. That's hard. That takes a level of permission. The second layer of permission is letting whatever is coming up inside us to come out onto the page, because we want to edit it out. We want to judge it. We want to say, no, that's not okay. That's not realistic. Why? That's absurd. I'm not writing that down. What if someone sees this? Right? So that's another
Yeah.
layer of permission and practice. Permission and practice go hand in hand. And little by little, what we're really doing is allowing our own truth and our own inner voices to be heard and acknowledged and embraced by us ourselves. Because this is a private practice. This is not one that you're going to sit down and share with your kids. Maybe not yet, maybe not ever. It's a private practice. But what's really important and at the heart of getting messy is giving yourself permission to be nakedly honest with yourself without judging, suppressing, batting it away, and stuffing it. Because that's where the pain and suffering comes from.
I thought that point in your book was really, really helpful because it is true. I found myself thinking something, but then really having to force myself almost to write it down because everything you said happens where that's not realistic. What would, that's not what my parents want me to do, right? I mean, I'm almost 50 and
Well, that's
I still,
sweet.
it still kind of seeps in there like, oh, would that be, is that attainable?
Yes.
How does that affect
What
everything else? Is it silly? So I think the permission and the practice, and I still struggle with it, but you're right, it does get a little easier. I almost felt like I wanted a diary, like when I was a little kid that had a log. I mean, the truth is nobody wants to read what I'm writing, but
No,
it felt, and it feels very vulnerable.
it is vulnerable. It is vulnerable. But that is the beginning of being more courageous, in your life. And courage in this case, meaning more true to who you are. And you just already in being vulnerable and sharing your experience with it, you named the thing that starts to come up very readily when we start this getting messy practice, which is the stories we carry in our heads about what's right, what's wrong, what's acceptable. As soon as you start getting messy, you're going to be confronted with all the stories you hold about what's attainable. You and I talked before we started recording about limiting beliefs, right? Our stories around money, which I talk about in the book, that I was raised to see how money could really unravel my father and my family when it became such a definition and measurement of his success. And you said, ooh, it feels uncomfortable to say I want more. I'm doing fine, but to earn more, that feels wrong for some reason. And I think part of the process that is so beneficial is to see those stories, face those stories, name those stories, write them down, and then sit with the stories that hold us back or make us play small in our lives, and to ask more questions around those stories. Is that really true? What evidence do I have that that story is true? And what would my life be without that story? If I just eradicated that story, got rid of it altogether, how would I show up differently in my work or in my marriage or in my parenting? But we have, again, been conditioned to believe that we can't ask these questions, that it's dangerous to ask these questions or selfish. I had a woman at my 2020, January 2020 Costa Rica retreat. And the first day she said, "Oh no, my parents taught me never to ask that question. What do I really want? It will always lead to disappointment." So we're all embedded with
Right.
some deep, tattooed stories about what we can or cannot do, what we can or cannot ask for. And many of them were given to us by well intentioned people who love us. But those are the stories holding us back.
And what have you seen, or how have you seen your clients, your readers move past these stories just by continuously revisiting them? Or um, what have you seen
Yeah,
being the most helpful?
there's a couple of chapters in the middle of the book, in the middle of Get Messy, which ask you to notice and then name and write down what are the stories coming up for you. And then to reframe those stories. So the act of rewriting those stories in a different way. So if money feels greedy, selfish, debilitating, requires sacrifice of the things that are really important, how would you reframe that? Well, money is self sufficiency. Money is fuel for doing more good. Money keeps my family healthy, thriving. And when my husband and I had to write a wealth brief, the penetrating question was, what is enough? Do we know what enough looks like? Down to dollars and cents, down to very tangible forms. And that got us in a real deep conversation about what are we making money for? Why does money exist in our lives? And more importantly, what role does it play? And our kids' education came right up to the top, and we realized we actually need very little. The longer I live, the more simple I want to live. So really, education just kept coming up as one of the things. And then when we kept talking about it, putting in tangible forms, we realized we probably have more than enough. And that gave me so much relief as the sole breadwinner of our family of six. And then we had another question, which is if we could only be rich in one area of our lives, if you took everything else off the table, what would it be? And we realized we want to be rich in relationships. And time was not far after that. And creativity was also not far after that. And so we realized, wow, money is really important. Money matters to fuel and fund the things that are really important to us, but it wasn't the end goal. And that allowed us to strive maybe a little less and realize we didn't have to hustle as hard.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up an interesting point, not only from the wealth perspective, but also doing these life briefs with your partner. I would imagine getting very vulnerable. Me and my little diary is very vulnerable, but doing that with another person must bring a whole different level to the brief. And also, I mean, you've mentioned that you can do a brief about any piece of your life. And do you suggest focusing on one brief for each part of your life versus one overarching brief? Or,
Yes. I think you can get sharper and more crystal clear if you're really aiming your attention, because our lives are huge
yeah,
and they're really full. And I invite people to write a brief about something that's gripping them right now, super top of mind. It's just, you think about it even when you're not trying, because and that's our body and our mind signals that, hey, pay attention here.
yeah.
Need more time and attention over here, and we tend to be so busy doing our to-do list, getting everything done. And as working parents, that busyness is real, it's not fake. But yet the answers we seek lie behind the questions we avoid. So again, small bites, just little moments, a few bucket of minutes a day, but aiming your attention there, so that you can marinate on it. And then inviting others into that process is an incredibly connective and bonding and revealing experience. Yes, it's vulnerable. I teach classes and workshops, and what I find, that's one type of community. When people get vulnerable with each other, it's amazing how much further people get in their own briefs. Because when you see someone bravely start and share something very open, one, what they're sharing tends to unlock an idea for yourself because you see yourself reflected in the other people. Two, it inspires you and gives you permission to meet and match their vulnerability. So it feels safer and braver at the same time. When couples do it, or friends do it, or even parents and adult children do it, even if they don't get to the final output, which is a brief, right? They really deepen their understanding of each other because it creates a container of meaningful conversation. You're really learning about each other and parts of each other that otherwise wouldn't come out in conversation when you're cooking dinner or doing the laundry or playing basketball together. Um, it's a great conversation starter for creating deeper connective tissue between people.
And because I've shared that, before you get the steps, or the way the book is organized, is to get messy, get clear, and then get active.
Mhm.
And before you move to the get active part, I mean, I've read past, but but I'm still stuck in the get clear, where it says, until you get to a fuck yes feeling, don't move on. Do you see that the workshops speed up those getting clear pieces?
Yes.
Because I think I'm about 6 months and I'm still just kind of flustering around in the get clear, and then I get back to getting messy.
Yes.
And so, what I know that everyone's on a different time frame, but how does that? I mean, is this something that maybe I'm just one of those people that'll never get past the
No,
get
you're not
clear?
at all. In community, it is faster because you have a lot of sounding boards in community saying, "Oof, I really felt it when you said that." So you're getting feedback, right? And so there's something abundant and energizing and vigorous about having other people be witness to your process. So in the workshops, we can play with lot of modalities. Like I can interview you and take notes on behalf so you can speak out your brief. And then I can read your body language, the tone of voice. So I can feel sometimes the fuck yes before you feel the fuck yes because you're so in your head.
Right.
Because this work is not just about intellect. This is accessing other parts of ourselves, like our gut, our heart, our intuition, right? But our culture is so intellect driven. And as a strategist, I know very well that my biggest Achilles heel and many strategists is overthinking. Well, is that a fuck yes? I don't know. Is that really a fuck yes? And fuck yes shows up really differently for each of us. Some of us will get goosebumps. Others will feel nervous, butterflies, right? Others will just feel fire in the belly, like, fuck yes. But it's really getting to know how that shows up to you. Is it just a little bit of excitement? Yeah. Or I can't stop thinking about that line I wrote. Yeah, it really resonates. It's already sticking. That might be the quiet fuck yes for you, right? The key is not to overthink it, not to need it to be perfectly right, whatever that means. And I know a lot of people read it and think, Bonnie, is that a fuck yes? It's really getting in touch with how are you feeling with it. Every time you look at what you've written, that whether it's a line or 5 declarations, when you read it to yourself, you think, yes, that is still true. Yes, I still feel conviction for it. Um, that's that's enough to start walking the path
Mm.
of the brief, right? Start acting on it. And then you will feel the call to evolve it or iterate if it's not quite there.
Well, you've talked about your workshops that you put on. Can you share some memorable moments or feedback that you've received from participants?
Yes, I named that first one, which sticks in my head about, the danger of the question. A lot of times people come into the workshop saying, I want to life brief my work. And then they end up with a life brief for themselves. Because what we realize is the urgency or the anxiety we might be feeling in one part of our lives is actually a symptom of another part of our lives that is much more core or at the root of the issue. So there are people who come into the workshops and they pivot, they get messy and they realize, oh, it's not actually about my job. My job and my unhappiness at my job is just a symptom that I'm not acknowledging something about myself and I'm not nourishing and feeding and fueling myself in the ways that I want to or that I need to. And so they discover in the Get Messy that they actually need to write a brief about something different than what they initially came in to write.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because we spend most of our time at work or as
Yes.
adults. Um,
We do over identify with our work. That is the society and the container we live in culturally. And so many people are discovering that they want to put their health over their hustle. That's one of the briefs that have come out from, someone I've worked with. I love that brief. I've borrowed it for myself. I think people are very much realizing that there's a difference between giving my best at work and giving my all.
yes.
And I think people are waking up everywhere saying, I will continue to give my best, but I no longer want to give my all. Because at the end of the day, that means trading out the relationships, time with my family, vacations for me to recuperate and reset, ways that I need to invest in myself, whether it's my mental health, my spiritual health, or my emotional health, and definitely my physical health. So I think that is something that is rolling through, if not ripping through the currents, not just here, but also in Europe, where people are rethinking this giving it all to work.
And that comes to the point of one of your suggestions in the book is to give your brief a mantra or a name. And I think I've shared with you that that is hard for somebody who's not or marketing focused, like the health over hustle. I would have come up with that. I know that you continuously create new briefs for yourselves. Do you have any personal mantras or philosophies that you're currently using?
Yes, my favorite briefs are Take Our Time. That was our original brief, which I adapted at one point to Take My Time because I had to disconnect from my family at times, and just have space to myself, which as a mom and as a woman, it was very hard to admit. Um, Ready to Receive. That's one of
Oh,
my latest self briefs because
that's
as
lovely.
an Asian woman
Yes.
who has worked so hard to the grind my
Hmm.
whole life, I had a real deep story. I still have it, so I can't say that I've successfully eradicated it or anything like that. But I have a story that I have to go at it alone. I can't ask for help. I can't lean on others because that would be a sign of weakness
Yes.
or that would be true vulnerability. I can talk about all my vulnerability, but to actually lean on someone else would be, oof, no, I can't go there. So this is my self brief for this year is I am ready to receive.
That's amazing because it is very true. It's something that I know that we are not alone, but it is so hard to ask for help. We're all very good helpers. I'm much more comfortable in that role of helping, but to actually accept, ask, accept, receive is is not something that I'm comfortable with at all. Um, so
Well, you and I share
maybe I
that.
will steal that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And the other one I used this year because I hit burnout. Launching my book and leading the agency, it was the best recipe for burnout. And so my brief coming out of that, I'm still coming out of that, I'm still healing, was to romance my rest. And here's the thing, it's not about getting clever about your mantra or your handle for your brief. Other word for it is your name, the name for your brief. And the reason you have a name is because it's hard to remember all your declarative statements and all the things you want. And, but it's nice to wrap it up in something. But it doesn't have to be clever. It just has to be sticky for you. So if you have to borrow a song, a lyric from a song, or just words that really penetrate for you that you can remember time and again, and it can tattoo into your mind and into your heart to reminder, right? When I think romance the rest, I'm like, okay. And what I like about it is not that it uses R's, and not
I
that it
like that.
sounds
Yeah.
sticky, but it it's bold. It's not just take a break. It's not just, hey, drink that glass of water. It's saying romance the rest. Take it all the way like you would take a lover, So the invitation I have in the book is don't just have a brief. A fuck yes brief is bold. It tests you to go further than you're comfortable with, because that's how we live a life of aliveness. So my marriage brief is not, I want to get along with my husband. I want to be good partners, or I even want to be co-creators of life or co-pilots. It's, I want mad love. And after all these years of marriage, 23, 24 and counting, 4 kids, lots of moves, lots of stress, is mad love even possible? But that's what I want. I'm too young, even in my 50s, early 50s. I'm too young not to feel the fire of desire. And mad love isn't just about sex or intimacy in those physical ways. It's about just having that excitement of being with one another. The fact that I can look at him and say, yes, I still choose you. There's a mad love surge in that. And so the boldest expression for my marriage brief is mad love, to be madly in love with him and see him as, yes, the ultimate partner, and wake up committed to that partnership every day in a way that isn't, "Ugh," or yes, here we go again. And it feels like that many days out of the year. Anyone who's been in a long-term relationship knows that you don't have mad love every day, but the brief keeps me looking for the opportunities to create that surge again, and small moments. So romancing the rest takes rest even further than just a break. Mad love takes our marriage further than just being co-producers of a big life.
This sort of dovetails wonderfully into, as I've said, that I've recommended your books to clients, especially ones who are going through or looking to retire in the next couple of years, and their careers were a big part of their identity. What's next? And so I told the client that you were coming on the podcast, and she had a question for you. Um, I'm just going to read it. It's, how do you stay present with your brief or slogan over time? For me, it can be out of sight, out of mind. So I wonder how she keeps it top of mind so that she can prioritize actions that support the goal. As I've lived with, her mantra is big love, full life. I
Ooh,
find my old fears creeping back in, and sometimes it takes me a minute to circle back to what I'm calling my anthem and letting go of the old fears. Any tips for staying
yeah,
present with their slogan?
such a good question. Thank you for it. And I love, can you read that again?
Her brief is big love, full life.
Oh, I can feel that so viscerally. Big love, full life. And hopefully what's underneath that, if that's the summation, right? The mantra and anthem. I love that she calls it the anthem, that she's defined what big love and a full life means to her. Because it's going to be different when if I took a declaration around that, right? Wrote my manifesto around big love, full life. But there is going to be doubt. That is part of our experience. And especially when we put out a vision that is big, that is bold, that is challenging us to go further towards it. And just for everyone out there, bold does not always mean bigger. It can, and it often does. Bold often means also to rest, like what we were just talking about. But there are absolutely moments of doubt. Something I just learned recently, which probably sums it up even better than I would have summed it up myself, is that the opposite of faith is not doubt, because doubt is so human. The opposite of faith is certainty. I'm just going to pause and let that sink in a little bit, because certainty is a blind adherence to something. Blind faith almost, right? But to have true faith in what you want requires some doubt, because the doubt is asking you every day, is this still what you really want? How bad do you want it? What are you willing to risk and trade off in order to have it, right? Are you willing to get out of your comfort zone today? Okay, you don't feel it. You don't feel it today, but what are you willing to do? What's one thing you want to do? What tiny thing you're willing to do to live that full life, big love today? So it's always this invitation. It's a reminder. It's beckoning you and pulling you through the doubt. So it's not wrong or bad or even unnatural to have the doubt. It's how do you use your brief to inspire you to come through the doubt and commit again. I keep my brief always on me, so I have it on my phone, and I have it in my head. So when I know, and then it's love language between me and my husband. If he says mad love, he's not saying, "Hey, let's go
Yeah.
up to the bedroom." That's
Yeah,
not
I
doing
was
it.
like,
But
"Oh,
he's like,
interesting."
"Hey, have we lost our connection?
Yeah,
Why did you
the
get angry
shorthand.
like
Yeah.
that? That's not mad love." And it just becomes an anchor back or a springboard forward to a new idea. Wait a second. No, I'm romancing the rest today. I'm going to turn off that phone and I'm going to take a bath and I'm going to have my favorite beverage, whatever that is. And I'm going to give myself an hour to romance the rest. No interruptions, no questions, no doubting about it, right? Because in getting active, it's all about what are the tiniest, most inexcusable, and irresistible ways that you can live your brief every day. It doesn't have to be giant leaps.
Have you had readers or workshop participants say that they put post-it notes on their
Yes.
fridge? Or, I
Yes.
mean, I'm just, if there's something visual that you recommend sometimes just to remember
Yes,
before
I
you.
love, I have a new friend, Shelley Paxton. She's the author of Soul Batical. She used to be the CMO of Harley Davidson, and she got off the hustle and grind herself and took a sabbatical, which she called a soul batical. But she gives herself post-it permission slips, and she tapes them everywhere. So permission to do X, permission to do Y, and she sticks them everywhere. I keep it always with me, and just the unfortunately my phone is my other companion,
Mhm.
my sidekick, and so I have it in big letters in all caps in my notes. And then I tell everyone in my family so that they can remind me. Part of it is enlisting the people who are going to support you and help you push through that doubt. You know, I have a good friend who's been journeying with me for a long time, and she knew that my wealth brief was rich in relationships. And this year, I have been making some real restructures to my career since the book launched. And so I'm stepping in. I say I'm stepping out of selling, which is advertising, and into serving, which is the life brief. And that we've really flipped our financial life in order to do that. We moved back to Portland, Oregon from the Bay Area for the second time. My mom is moving in with us. We're simplifying our lives so that I can bet on myself and almost treat it like a startup. But I was lamenting on what a drastic pay cut I've taken. And she said to me, "Yes, but you've really nailed your wealth brief. Look at this. You're moving in with your mom. You have more time with your kids now because you're at home more than ever. You kind of nailed that rich in relationships brief." So, so there are people that we surround ourselves that can hold us accountable for those briefs. And I say actively enlist them to remind you, even when your other values perk up, or, you start thinking, um, wow, that other person's life feels right, really good. Or, wow, my past life had all these things that now I've let go of. Have those people who, keep you strong.
The check, right? Someone to keep you in check, the accountability, and the asking for help. It all
Yes.
circles together. Um, yeah, I have so many questions that I want to ask you, but
Can I say
and I
something
want to
about
be
the
mindful of
help?
your time.
I just want to say one thing about the help.
Yeah,
I learned this year that people in our lives are dying to help. They've been waiting to help, but they have been wondering when I'm going to allow them in. And so one of the beautiful gifts, bountiful gifts of this year for me in having the brief, I'm ready to receive, is seeing how much people want to give and how much that gives back to them to be able to gift you. And it really broke a limiting belief for me around transactionalism. I thought that, oh my gosh, if they give to me, I need to give back to them something, and the fact is that so many of the best relationships we have go long and deep, and they are not at all transactional. In fact, the well of the giving is so deep that it blew my mind this year.
that's great. And I agree. I think it's um, opening myself up for help. I know how much I enjoy helping people, and especially those who I care about. It does it. I want to, and I'm trying to receive, I don't know, better by remembering that they feel the same way
Yeah.
about me. So that's what I just keep trying to remind myself. But I will have to use the ready to receive brief.
Do it.
Yes, thank you.
Nobody has any ownership, right? And that's why the community, when we get together with each other,
Yeah,
people see sparks in other people and like, oh, I'm going
yes,
to steal or borrow that. I say,
yes,
yes, steal it,
yes.
borrow it, use it.
Well, where can people find you? Your website and LinkedIn? What's the best way to contact you? Or
My,
obviously buy your book on Amazon, but you also have workshops that you put on.
yeah, well, this is life briefing season. Not that, I mean, life briefing is timeless, but beginning of the year is usually the season where everyone gets really invigorated. So, definitely my website, thelifebrief.com. I'm teaching a 4-class course starting February 7th. And I'm really excited about that one. It's going to be online, but live, 2 hours every Friday in February. Um, and we're going to really go deep and play with technology and community, harness community, and inspire each other through the process. Because January is usually when the resolutions wear off and fade.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Yep.
need something that's going to be longer lasting and hopefully a fuck yes. And LinkedIn, I'm running a fun 12 Days of Clarity campaign right now where I'm just kind of getting in there and inviting people to share their limiting beliefs, share their mess, and also share their clarity and their tips for action. So lots of places.
And is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think it's important to share about the life brief and the work you do?
Yes, it's the one thing that we talked about, you and I, before we got on, which is about creative living. And you said, well, when I think about the word creative or creativity, I think of artists or people who are creative professionals. They do it for a living, and even marketing. And you and I talked about finance and marketing. That is so much more clever, creative. And it's not that. For me, creativity is a mindset. And it's a mindset rooted in the understanding that we always have more choice and agency than we are conditioned to believe we have. We live in a culture that is very binary. You either have a yes or you have a no. You have to choose this or that. You either stay here or go there. When we think about our jobs or our relationships. But the fact is there's so many more ways that we can slice it, ways that we can put it together. Um, I never imagined that my agency would allow me to be the first remote employee so that I could be the parent I needed to be so many years ago. And I was able to do that for 6 years before they promoted me to a partner and head of strategy. I never imagined in my binary thinking. I always thought, no, in order to put my family first, I have to leave my job and I have to then find another form of income. But there it was, an option that we were going to experiment with together and very successfully for many, many years, way before the pandemic. And I found that in so many different parts of not only my life, but in the lives of people who have gone through the process, is that when we can open ourselves up to other possibilities and ask ourselves, well, what if this or what if that? Has nothing to do with artistic talent. It does have everything to do with opening our minds up and playing with possibilities.
Oh, I think that's beautifully said. Playing with possibilities, right? You're right. Um, it's again the permission. It's the permission to play and the permission to ask yourself these questions. I asked a couple of closing questions to every guest, and one of them is, how do you maintain your own balance and peace?
This year, I really doubled down on my spiritual practice. And I'm not religious, so I don't want that to be confusing. But um, really deepening my belief that things will unfold as they're meant to. And that has really helped me lift out of doubt, fears, um, and especially fears of uncertainty as I kind of walk a path. I leave a 30-year well carved path into a whole new terrain where every step feels foreign. That is very wobbly for me. And so my spiritual practice is really centering before I do anything, before I start anything at any given day, that I really center in myself. And I envision what's coming and what I want. What does success look like today? What is going to feel powerful today? And I really keep it at that, because one step at a time in a whole new foreign terrain.
Well, I think you've proven that you are good things keep coming for you. I just think it's
But there are
amazing
days
that,
when we stop
yeah,
believing, just like your
right.
client,
Yes.
right? There are
Yeah.
days that we doubt and the darker thoughts come in,
Hmm.
and then something comes in to prove us wrong. So
Yeah.
having the faith that we can't see that something, we can't plan for that something, but that it is out there.
And what hobbies or interests do you maintain outside of work? Again, a lot of my clients are looking toward retirement, and studies show that people in retirement who have hobbies or interests have a much richer life in retirement. And I mean,
Okay.
arguably always, right?
Yes, yes. I love sleeping under the stars. So if I can travel somewhere where it's warm enough, it doesn't have to be super warm, but um, in the desert where I can sleep outside, I love tapping into the awe of nature. It just reminds me not to overthink, that I'm not in control, that there are still things that are so much bigger and beyond ourselves. Um, there's nothing better than that feeling of awe and wonder.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to steal that too.
Believe me, you do it once and it is just game changing, mind blowing.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I really think we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate your time from your busy schedule. Thank you so much
Oh,
for joining us.
Betty, thank you for creating the podcast and putting everything out there and shining light on the life brief.
Well, you were a big part of. I'm still in the getting clear, but this the podcast is definitely a product of some of the things I discovered while doing the lessons in your book. So thank you.
Clarity, not perfection, though.
Yes, I wrote down stop practicing, stop planning. That's a, a quote in your book that it's true. We just have
Just
to
start acting.
baby
And
steps.
yes, and as soon as you start acting, clarity will find you.
Yes, and I have faith that that will happen. Not there yet though.
Amen.
Thank yeah, thank you.
Thank you.